What's up, guys? UFC 304 takes place this Saturday in Manchester, England. And this is my full card predictions, where I'm going to be going through every single fight on the card, giving my take on who I think is going to get the dub. I will offer up a lean for the method of victory, but we're not tracking this on the channel, just looking at the picks percentage here. Currently at a 60% clip, which, that's rookie numbers. I know it's not anything to write home about, but I've been doing a little bit more tape study. I'm feeling confident with some of the high-level matchups we have on this card. So, let's get into it, man. First fight of the night, we got Shauna Bannon versus Ardelean. Ardelean is taking this fight on short notice as a replacement for the original opponent that Shauna Bannon had, Ravina Oliveira. I would have picked Ravina Oliveira to win that fight, but I think that I'm going to have to go with Shauna Bannon here because she has had a full camp. We've at least seen her perform, and I know it wasn't the most glorious performance, but she did look like a competent striker. And when I'm looking at Ardelean and I'm considering that she does have millions of followers on TikTok, it makes sense why they would want to sign her as a short notice replacement, try to drum up a little bit of hype for this fight, which, wouldn't necessarily normally have any gas on it at all. And that you could, sell that she's on a 4-fight win streak with her last 3 coming by finish. But when you look at the level of competition, you see, her last opponent was 0-3. So, this is like one of those fights where maybe Ardelean has had a very impressive resurgence since losing in a surprise bout to Weili Zhang back in 2016. Who would have thought she fought who would have went on to become the champ? But I don't think that with what we know of Ardelean, I can confidently pick her here. So give me Shauna Bannon to win by decision. So moving on to the next fight of the card, we have Mick Parkin versus Łukasz Brzeski. Brzeski impressed us in his last fight against Walter Walker, but sometimes you learn after the fact that was it more impressive from, Łukasz Brzeski, or was Walter Walker fraud-checked and very overhyped? That's kind of how I'm feeling, if I'm being honest, the latter, because Łukasz Brzeski, when you're looking at the optics, coming into the UFC, he had 1 loss and looked huge, and then you see him in the cage versus Martin Bidet, and you're like, this guy doesn't look like how he used to look. Maybe he had to go off the sauce. That's just, again, an observation here, not an accusation. That his physique really changed in a let's just say it's like the Vitor Belfort effect. And so, opposite him, Mick Parkin. Does this guy train at the champ camp with Tom Aspinall? Yes. If you look at this guy's tapology, might you think that he is a finisher because he's finished 66% of his fights? You would think that. But, in his sample size of his 3 UFC fights, he looks like a point fighting style fighter. Like, we're having a spar. Kind of like, our guys in the main event, Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards. I don't think that that's a reliable strategy for heavyweight MMA, given that one day you're going to run into like a Jairzinho Rozenstruik who's going to sleep you in a viral UFC Apex main event. So yeah, I don't know. When you look at him too, physically, he's a big guy. He fills out the division, but he doesn't have one of those, Ngannou type physiques where you're like, man, this guy, he must just be so unbelievably strong. I will give him the decision victory. I think that he'll win a decision against Łukasz Brzeski, but I think that his style is only going to take him so far. That's just sort of a greater than just this fight take on Mick Parkin, but I do believe he gets it done by decision. So, next fight, we have Sam Patterson versus Kiefer Crosbie. I'm going to sound harsh here, but I don't think Kiefer Crosbie is somebody who believes he's going to be a UFC champion. I think that he wins a celebrity boxing match in, around this time last year, and then he loses to Kevin Jousset. And is Kevin Jousset a good fighter? Yes, but he just got completely dominated and submitted in that fight. And oppositely, was it a bit worrisome when Sam Patterson got flatline KO'd by Yanal Ajmuz in his UFC debut? Yes, but when you have a 6'3" lightweight who's just killing himself to get down to the weight, you can understand where somebody is susceptible to getting chinned because of the weight cut. And I think that was almost a blessing in disguise for him, because when he comes back at 170 versus somebody in Johan Lainez who has proven that he's at least a tough out, right? He's not a world beater, but he's not an easy guy to get out of there. And even, come home with a victory against, he dominated him in the grappling and submitted him, which is what I think that Sam Patterson will be able to do against Kiefer Crosbie as well. So we're going to go with Sam Patterson to win by rear naked choke. I could see him, at some point getting into that position where you're sort of in the clinch and you're able to use an underhook and pass under your opponent and take their back, drag them down, take the back, and then progress into a rear naked choke. I do see that as a strong possibility. Don't really see him getting a KO victory, but anyway, that's who I think is going to get the dub on this one. So moving on to the next fight on the card, we have an interesting one to be this early on the card. Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape. This is a main card quality fight. Why they moved it down? Maybe it's because Kape has been missing weight, or he missed weight in his last out. Maybe it's because these guys got into a fight at the Fighter Hotel. And look, there's just a lot of reasons why we might not even see this fight take place. I really hope it does, because there's heat on it. And look, this is one of those fights that's going to set somebody up for, this could potentially be a title eliminator, if not the bout that then leads to the title eliminator. It's unclear the direction that flyweight is going to go. You still have, excuse me, you still have guys in the mix who, you can't necessarily, rule out that they could be back in title contention. After all, Steve Erceg is currently slated to fight Kai Kara-France. Maybe it's just as easy as the winner of this fight fights the winner of Steve Erceg versus Kai Kara-France. But anyway, let's get into this one. Muhammad Mokaev has I would almost put him on the same level as a Merab. I'm not going to say he's got a Merab level cardio when it comes to taking shots, but he doesn't have a Merab level actually finishing the shots. A lot of times he allows himself to shoot in on a shot and get sprawled, but still somehow kind of protect his head on the inside and try to bump and duck and try to just break his opponent's posture and be able to finish a takedown from a position where most of the time people would give up because they believe they've been successfully sprawled upon and now they need to watch their neck. We haven't really seen anybody successfully go for chokes on Mokaev. We have seen Tim Elliott take Muhammad Mokaev down and control him on the ground. And look, Muhammad Mokaev would have lost that fight if he didn't get a third round finish. Oppositely from him, you have a guy, Manel Kape, who we've, at least in the UFC, I know back in Ryzen he implemented the grappling more, but in the UFC I'm focusing really on that sample size because it's his more recent fights, it's more indicative of how he fights now. That, look, he's really trying to get it done on the feet. He sets up through very, what is the word that I'm looking for? There's intent behind his movement, right? He's not just moving to move. He's setting up big shots. He's landing big shots. He's landing damaging shots. I think that with the damage-based scoring model, to beat a guy like Manel Kape, you're going to have to be able to at least match him on the feet with the damage that you can cause. And that's the biggest knock on Makayev. I don't think that he's going to be able to land enough damage. I think that he's going to have to rely on racking up enough control time to be able to nullify Kape's ability to do damage, which, look, I just don't think he's going to be able to. I think Kape understands the assignment. He's been talking about how he's had Dagestani wrestlers in camp who are, just shooting on him. He's probably working on timing his knees and his uppercuts. I think that Makayev is too tough to get finished. We saw him basically accept a knee bar versus Jafel Filho, but we also have to acknowledge that was Jafel Filho, right? Not even on the level of Manel Kape, and that guy is, putting him in precarious grappling situations. I know that guy's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but still, give me Muhammad Makayev to win a decision because I think that he's going to do more damage, and I think I could see like a 29-28, maybe even a split decision. But I just can't see Makayev. If Makayev struggled that much with Tim Elliott, he's going to struggle with Manel Kape, I think. And then MMA math isn't always that clean, but that is what I think here. So anyway, moving on, we have Oban Elliott versus Preston Parsons. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. I got Preston Parsons to win a decision. I really liked how he looked in his last performance against Matthew Semmelsberger. He showed that I can cause damage on the feet with my strikes. I'm not pitter-pattering. I'm trying to land on you and cause damage with my strikes. And he's also adept in the grappling, and bro is jacked for welterweight. And it's just do I think that this is a lock? No. Because Oban Elliott is a prospect who is coming off of, a win in his UFC debut, and he's got 6 consecutive victories. But man, in that fight versus Val Woodburn, you just kind of felt like you were watching a guy win a fight, but that they were actually somewhat close to each other's levels. And he didn't beat Val that dominantly. I don't think Val is that good. I don't think Val is anything, Val got absolutely chinned by Bo Nickel. So yeah, I think that you got to go with Preston Parsons here, and I think that he'll probably win a decision. Even though he does land good shots, damaging shots, I think that, he also just understands that, look, he's probably not going to chase the finish if he hurts him. He's just going to note that, okay, I've caused some damage here. He is a bit of a decision style fighter, is Preston Parsons. Or he's going to rack up submissions. But again, I think that we've seen Oban Elliott adept enough in the grappling, and you're seeing Preston Parsons, who got a lot of submissions before getting to the UFC against competition where you could do that. So moving on to the next fight on the card, we have Modestas Bukauskas versus Marcin Prachnio. And I'm going to be going with the underdog here. I'm going to be going with Marcin Prachnio. I think that when you go down the Tapology and you look at some of the losses that he was having, getting knocked out in the first round by Sam Alvey, ages like milk. But when you look at, the fact that in his best day, he's dominantly beating Khalil Roundtree just 3 years ago in a decision victory, and that, when you also weigh that and what we've seen from him against what we've seen from Modestas Bukauskas, I just think that Bukauskas is only really capable of beating guys like Zach Pauga or Chuck Campbell or Lee Chadwick, who, and 2 of those weren't even in the UFC. Zach Pauga, Tyson Pedro's not. So I just can't confidently go with Modestas Bukauskas because he hasn't showed me an ability to just finish fights in the UFC, to have that killer instinct, and he just doesn't seem to have like the urgency. He's just like willing to let a fight go to a close decision, and he'll probably kind of win it if the guy that he's fighting is somebody who is like debut level UFC tier. When I've seen Marcin Prachnio have bouts against guys who are at the upper echelon of the light heavyweight division. So again, I'm going to just go with, the eye test of these two fighters and how I think that that's going to mesh. Moving on, we have Caolán Loughran versus Jake Hadley. And again, I'm going to keep it simple. I got Caolán Loughran to win a decision. Jake Hadley, why are you sabotaging your own career? This doesn't make sense. You're losing matches at flyweight because you are literally getting outsized and you're getting dominated. In your losses, it's not like there was ever a point in time where we felt like you were going to win. You're losing to Charles Johnson, who, again, is doing well. You're losing to Cody Durden, and you're losing to Alan Nascimento. Like, those are three good fighters, yes, but like, the way that you're losing is that in the Charles Johnson one, you're getting out-volumed. In the Cody Durden and Alan Nascimento one, you're getting ragdolled. You get out-ragdolled and out-volumed, and now on short notice, you're going to go up a weight class against a guy who's tricky because he's strong. He's a high-level prospect coming into the UFC who, lost to Taylor Lapalus in his debut, sure, but then comes back and has a solid win against Angel Pacheco. Jake's not... I'd be very shocked and impressed if Jake Hadley somehow pulls this off. But this is like one of the locks of the card, I think. Caolán Loughran to win a decision. Because I do think that, Jake Hadley is tough. But I think that he's ultimately going to just get outsized. I wish he would just take time off and allow himself to properly rebuild. I just really wish. Anyway, moving on to the next fight, we have Molly McCann versus Bruna Brasil. I'm going with Molly McCann. I already gave my take on Bruna Brasil earlier in the breakdown. I don't think that she's extremely high level. She lost, she lost to Luma Lukbumni, who is never going to be a world champion. I know that this sounds harsh, but her only win is against Shauna Bannon, who's the curtain jerker of this card, fighting somebody who nobody's ever heard of. Molly McCann she lives up to her nickname, Meatball. She is one of the only female fighters who... Wow, my voice just cracked badly there. One of the only female fighters who's consistently getting finishes. And, very impressive finishes. And I understand that she got up to a point at flyweight where she was losing after her very glorious run, 3-fight run. But she lost to Erin Blanchfield. And I know that Stolyarenko loss doesn't look the greatest because Stolyarenko herself has not done very well. But I think that at that weight, she was really struggling with the high-level grapplers. And, since coming down to strawweight, I think that she looks to be in great shape. And, how's Bruna going to beat her? I think that Molly could even, take her down and submit her, potentially. Or drop her and submit her. I got Meatball by finish. Probably a knockout. I got Meatball coming out, hype, to a sold-out Manchester crowd, getting a vintage Meatball finish. So, moving on to the next fight in the prelims. We have Nathaniel Wood versus Daniel Pineda. And this is another one where I have to go with the obvious pick of Nathaniel Wood to win a decision. Because, and again, my take on the decision is just because I think that Nathaniel Wood is going to be desperate for a win here, guys. Our guy has lost some, he's beating John Dodson, and then he gets finished in the third round, which, dude, that's a loss, right? But it's just, tough because if he had won that fight, that would have been, a breakout performance. he beats Casey Kenny and then loses a decision in the Middle East on the Khabib Gaethje card. It literally didn't make sense. I was super confident that Nathaniel Wood won that fight. That was the time where, like, I don't know, the judges were giving Casey Kenny some interesting wins. He was kind of like, oh, never mind. I can't think of her name right now, so I'm just gonna move past that one. Yeah, he loses to Muhammad Naimov, who cheated realistically committed about 6 or 7 fouls in that fight and didn't have a single point deduction. And that fight ended with Wood in like a postured up guard, like postured up open guard position, literally just raining down ground and pound, like hammering at Muhammad Naimov, and then they still gave Muhammad Naimov the nod. I thought even with no point deduction, based on damage, like they could have maybe given it to Wood second and third round, but I think that he's going to be very focused on getting the dub here. He won a grappling match since then versus Alex Caceres, so like you can take something from that. I like that. I like to see guys staying active because that last fight was in October, so it's been a little bit, not too long, but anyway, Nathaniel Wood's going to win this fight, man. I think he's just going to be in that, you know, he's talked about how he's a guy who's really suffered from like mental issues and like confidence issues and stuff, and but like he also strikes me as a very intelligent guy, and I think he just understands his role here. Like, win this fight, and let's get back on an awesome win streak, and let's reignite his nickname, the Prospect, because he still is. You know, he needs to have a couple wins and then a marquee win. I think that he's a guy who's at the level to be top 15, maybe like 10 to 15. So give me Nathaniel Wood, and moving on to the first fight of the main card, Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. And this is a bit of a tricky one. I know that the line is certainly suggesting that Allen should win this. And I do believe Allen should win this. Allen, I kind of think that he won his last fight against Movsar. He just did more damage than Movsar did. And for whatever reason, when some of these guys like Movsar fight, and it pretty much comes down to the judges applying the criteria of damage and then effective grappling, they just seem to sort of forget how to judge a fight. And then it's like he loses in a barn burner of a main event against Max Holloway. Before then, he had a Leon Edwards, tier unbeaten streak. So I think that Arnold Allen has the ability to work in the grappling if he wants to, but also I think that he could, land some very damaging shots on the feet. I think that he's a cerebral fighter who understands his opponent and is a good camp. It is going to understand that a guy like Giga has very dangerous kicks, but he's also shown that he doesn't eat damage the greatest. He can be taken down, and he's, a little bit predictable in the sense that he's gonna do a long range kicking strategy, and if you crowd the kicker, he's gonna really struggle to get those kicks off. I think Allen's gonna stay in his face. He's gonna just be aggressive, and he's gonna out hustle Giga to a decision. I think Giga will make a good account of himself, and I know you're probably saying, a lot of decisions, Chase. Well, things might change here on the main card with the last few fights. And in the next fight, we have Christian Leroy Duncan versus Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez. I've heard a lot of people going with Gregory Rodriguez here, and there's a lot of reasons why he feels like the right pick, right? You think that he's probably the better grappler out of the two, and it's like he's a dangerous striker, but he leaves himself wide open to be blasted by a guy like Christian Leroy Duncan, who is a tricky striker, and I don't think that he's a total slouch in the grappling department, but Christian Leroy Duncan, gosh, that loss to Armin Petrosian, where Armin was able to implement some grappling against him, We don't think of Armin Petrosian as a grappler. How old is Gregory Rudd? He's only 32. And he just is coming off that win where he knocked out Brad Tavares and Dennis Tululan, and he's got some momentum. I was thinking maybe to try to go with Christian Leroy Duncan. I am going to go with RoboCop. I think that RoboCop, probably one of the best things to happen to him is to get chinned by Bruno Ferreira, because now he understands his mortality, and he's probably just going to understand, look, man, if I push the grappling and get Christian Leroy Duncan tired, and then maybe I play the striking a little later, dude, he's not. I think that it's Christian Leroy Duncan first round KO because RoboCop just eats an absolute bomb of a shot, or RoboCop wins a decision. And my pick is RoboCop by decision, but I could see it playing out the other way too. But that's my official pick. Is Gregory Rodriguez to win by KO, TKO, ground and pound shots. I really do think that grappling is going to be too much for Christian Leroy Duncan. Now things are getting really interesting because we have Bobby. I'm just going to say Bobby Green, guys. I know that you're going to be like, oh, dude, the disrespect and not calling him king. First of all, I doubt he's going to watch this anyway. And second of all, I just feel like a child if I'm referring to a grown man as king. So Bobby Queen Green versus Paddy Pimblett. No, all jokes aside, Bobby Green's a G. He's been in the game for a minute. He's got a vintage, hands down, fighting style, really solid head movement. Not really that much pop on his shots, from an individual shot perspective, but is the type of guy who, the volume adds up, and when he feels like he's getting to you, he grows tremendously in confidence. He does come from a wrestling background, but we don't really see him use it offensively. We did see him submit Tony Ferguson, which is super impressive via arm triangle. I'm not going to take anything away from that. Everyone will say that, and then but I'm just going to, he did do that. But Paddy Pimblett is really solid when it comes to the grappling. I know that this is a bit of a hot take, but I could see Paddy Pimblett beating Benoit Saint-Denis. I really could. I think that his striking is actually underrated too. In that Ferguson fight, did he finish Tony like Bobby did? No, but dude, in that first round, some refs would stop the fight. I think that given the circumstances of Tony's career and his toughness, they wanted to give him all the chances, but I like Paddy's ability to just say fuck it, man, and go for big shots that come from odd angles, that land hard. And I think Bobby Green's going to be overconfident and he's going to eat one of those shots. And I think Paddy will implement his, I don't think he's going to be spamming shots like a Muhammad Makayev, but I think that he's going to find his opportunities to work the grappling. And if Paddy gets the back, he'll just stay there, man. He's probably not going to get the sub, but he'll just stay there. And he's good enough to do that. And he's good enough to also find his pockets to land shots to, if he gets a takedown, secure the round. And guys, let's just be honest, this is in England too. Unless Bobby beats his ass, I think that they're going to give the decision to Paddy anyway. So I'm going to go with Paddy Pimblett by decision. Moving on to the undisputed heavyweight championship. The People's Undisputed Heavyweight Championship. Nobody cares about John Jones versus Stipe. I'm in that camp. You know what I'm saying? I don't care. Tom, let's just talk about this legendary run that he's been on. As long as we, sort of blemish out his Curtis Blades loss, which again was, a mid-fight injury. This guy comes into the UFC on a 4-fight knockout streak in the first round. 4 fights with consecutive first-round finishes. Okay, and now this guy's in the UFC. First-round knockout versus Jake Collier. First round knockout versus Alan Badeau. Second round sub against Andrei Arlovsky, where he literally blast doubled him and then just like took the back and immediately got a choke. And it was almost like a standing rear naked. And Andre taps almost immediately because of the pressure that he was feeling. First round knockout of Sergey Spivak. First round submission of Alexander Swolkov. This is Swolkov too, not when, back in the day, when he was undersized. Again, we blemish out that loss against Curtis Blades. First round finish against Tybura. I know that it's Tybura, but that's impressive. First round knockout. First round knockout against Sergey Pavlovich when Pavlovich was on his amazing run. Guys, nobody has ever done this in the UFC. Ever. We've never seen a more dominant force in the UFC than Tom Aspinall. We just haven't. Tom is what Khamzat was supposed to be, right? He's doing what Khamzat was supposed to do, but he's doing it. He didn't, and he's doing it way better than Khamzat, because we already saw when Khamzat got to a Gilbert Burns level of guy that he had to eke out a decision. And same against Kamaru Usman. I know that the circumstances of that fight were a bit strange and that Khamzat, hurt his hand during it, but Tom is the king of the North, the prince who was promised. And if John Jones fights him, he'll finish John Jones. I'm very confident of this because I think he's going to go down as the greatest heavyweight of all time with what he's showing. When I saw, even back in the day, what he did to Andrei Arlovsky, I said, this is a future GOAT right here. Because we don't see guys this dominant. We see guys this dominant in their first 2 fights, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, now, the level of competition. We really don't know what this guy's ceiling is. But enough of the Tom Aspinall glazing. Guys, Curtis Blades is legit. And, he could win this fight. But if I'm nitpicking here, right? Man, he had a competitive first round against Chris Daukaus before finishing him in the first round. And then he gets chinned against Sergey Pavlovich in a fight with the highest of stakes, with the lowest of IQ game plan. And if he didn't catch a moment where he was able to just hammer fist away Jailton Almeida in a sprawl sequence, he was on his way to get humiliated by Jailton Almeida in the grappling department, having a performance against him like Derek Lewis had. We were there's an alternate reality where that happened, and now we're looking at Curtis Blades as a guy who's main eventing the Apex versus Marcin Tybura, and I don't see how he's going to be able to beat Tom. I think Tom, we're witnessing greatness, and he's going to rise to the occasion, and he's going to knock Curtis Blades out in the first round with just a 1-2. He said he's been soaking his hands in petrol. Listen, I think that he's going to get the finish here in a very, very impressive manner in front of a crowd that's going to absolutely erupt. Okay, guys, we're moving on to the main event, which is Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad for the undisputed strap in the welterweight division. This is way harder than everybody's making it out to be, guys, because Leon Edwards is the king of, nobody plays with their food like Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards will have you rocked and then will proceed to just do nothing. Or Leon Edwards will throw 60 strikes in an entire fight, where you have guys throwing that many strikes in a round. He relies on his distance management and his striking acumen. But more importantly, he relies on his ability for the ref to not call fouls against him. This guy's whole single leg defense is grabbing the inside of the glove. He did it so many times in the rematch versus Usman. Like, that does not get talked about enough. Everybody says that that was his best performance and that he looked so impressive. Like, he cheated so many times in that fight. And then he fought Colby, who we know injured himself mid-fight. And, like, yeah, he won, but it's like, dude, school Colby then. Imagine if Aljamain Sterling took TJ Dillashaw to a decision, and in the 5th round, TJ Dillashaw was, like, on top of Aljo, hitting him and winning the last round. It's just, like, a bad look. Like, Leon's his own worst enemy. I think that he's, like, afraid of losing, and so he just fights to not lose. And, like, his opponent is the clock, basically, and he's trying to beat the clock. And he wants to be more impressive within the confines of the clock. And every single thing that I just said about Leon Edwards applies to Belal Muhammad, but more so. Other than the fact that Belal Muhammad will go after it a little bit more if he smells, blood in the water like he did against Sean Brady. And, like, he will at least maybe not go for it. Like, again, he should have went for it more against Gilbert Burns, but, like, at least he turned the volume up enough to, like, very definitively win and then just make sure he didn't, like, fluke the match, because that was supposed to get him a guaranteed title shot. And then, it just, I don't know, it ended up taking all the way until now for, this fight to actually get booked. And Belal understands that, like, this is it, man. It took everything this guy could do. The culmination of a career's work, the culmination of a 9-fight unbeaten streak, fighting the best guys in the world to get this title shot. And he's 36. He's not getting another one. So I'm saying all this because, like, Belal could just go crazy in this fight. And, like, I don't know, man, there's, like, a world, I guess, where Leon just doesn't do enough and loses a decision to Belal. But, like, I would like that outcome. That outcome would be so much more likely if this wasn't in the UK. I think that Belal to win by decision, and also understanding that, like, Leon will probably get to cheat a bunch of times. Like, that's another thing. It's like, I'm trying to bank on things that, like, what if Leon loses a point? And that swings, like, the whole match, or results in, like, a fucking draw or something. Anyway, oh, man. I'm going to go with Leon Edwards to win, because I think that Leon has good enough striking acumen for Belal to not be able to style on him like Belal was doing against Burns. And I think that, like, when we think of Belal, for some reason, because he's been training with Khabib, we think of him as this, like, Khabib-style grappler. But really, the only people that we've seen him implement this on recently is Wonder Boy and an over-the-hill Luque. He was not shooting takedowns against Gilbert Burns. So I'm going to go with Leon Edwards to win a, headshot decision. And but I think that it could be a very, like, do I think it's going to be the most exciting fight? But it could be a high-level fight that, you might be wondering during the fight, is Belal going to eke this out? And he just might. But, like, you got to go with Leon by decision here. So if you like the content, please like the video. Give a subscribe. I'll be posting more content. I'll be posting my best bets for the card. Some individual videos with some breakdowns on, the more hype fights of the card. But yeah, I hope that we're in for some, great fights this Saturday. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Take it easy, gang.